And we're live. Hey, buddy.
Yeah. Hey, how are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Yeah, surviving these strange and stormy times we suddenly moved into.
We are broadcasting live in Callin and also in several Facebook groups and on our YouTube channel. So we'll take a minute and let people hop in with us. I'm going to suggest that we mute ourselves on Callin when we're not talking because it seems like there's a lot of airflow or something.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I was just typing. Yeah,
Wonderful.
I will do
Well,
that.
yeah, let's jump into it, man. Before we get started today, I just want to make a personal comment and let everybody know that our hearts and prayers are really going out to the people in Ukraine and Russia. This week has been captivating in a horrible way, and we know friends and business partners in both countries, and really believe for the very best in terms of quick resolution. And I think that's my hope and prayer is that this just ends quickly. And I wanted to mention that because I don't know about you, Michael, but when we talk about marketing, a lot of times war metaphors just kind of insert themselves. I mean, it kind of we turn it into war language frequently, and I just don't want to be insensitive to that in the week, where there's such conflict in Europe. And so, thanks for letting me just mention that. But I do think it's important for us to keep it top of mind. People are in desperate situations as they listen, and even our business partners that we work with are caught in this. And so, there you have it. I want to just make that comment before we jump in. So,
Yeah, we're living in very crazy times. The sensitivity in this week is, I believe, going to need to extend over the next year to 3 to 5 years. I don't know how long, but I think this is going to be it for Europe. This is the next big war, and yeah, it does make you think, if apart from anything else, to appreciate living in a safe place with internet connections and things, luxuries that we take for granted. And of
yeah.
course, they're not a given in every country. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
so we need to make the most of it.
with that said, let's jump into it today. What do we have on the docket here? I think we've got a
On the
great
docket, so yeah,
topic.
so in crazy times, I think we need to be willing to consider not only quite radical pivots, but quite big ones quite quickly. So anyone who's got business in Russia, for example, as you said, we both have some connections out there who are massively struggling suddenly. And to do that, you need some solid principles. And one of the books that we're both passionate about, you just read, I think for the first time we'll listen to, The Star Principle by Richard Koch, is an amazing business classic. And I think it gives a really great framework for all sorts of big picture business decisions. So very timely, I think, as well.
Great. Let's do it. You ready to do it? Kick this thing off?
Oh, I think you're muted on calling, Jason. Sorry.
Sorry, man. You ready to kick this thing off?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
The Star Principle book by Richard Koch is a business classic, and it presents a very wise strategic framework he learned while founding the Boston consulting firm. Today, we'll show the framework, debate the merits of the model, and see if we can't find some practical applications for e-commerce operators. Jason, you ready for this important topic?
Yeah, I love the book. I did just listen to it on my road trip to Phoenix and back and really enjoyed it, got a lot out of it. And I think there's a ton of value for e-commerce operators. And so for people who aren't familiar with this book, we're going to go through kind of the high level overview. And then we'll also adapt it and apply it to our own situations a bit and to some examples so that we've got a lot to bring forth, kind of practically from it. So yeah, I'm excited about this conversation. You want to give us sort of a top level overview of the book, and I know you're a huge fan of it. You've podcasted about it before and blogged about it, so lead us into it, man.
Yeah, I mean, even to the extent where I bought a set of it and was going to give it to my mastermind members, but most of them had bought it by then because I'd been talking about it so much for so long. Yeah, so my understanding of the Boston Consulting Group matrix, which is really the basis for the STAR principle, first of all, I think it's been around for a long time. I think it was quite big in the 60s even. So it's not new, but the power of it's been overlooked, I think. My understanding is that you have two aspects that define STAR business, or the other aspects. One is the growth rate of the market they're in. Is it above or below 10% annually? And online, many markets are growing extremely fast. So that's maybe not such a radical thing for us. The percentage of market share that the market has, or let me try that again. the percentage of market share of that market which a particular company has, in other words, are you a market leader or a follower, is the other main criterion. And that, I think, is a lot harder for many of us online, are part of growing markets, but not the market leader. So market leader is really defined as having about twice as much revenue as a percentage of the market as your nearest competition. That's my understanding. So we've got 4 quadrants. Shall I summarize them and then we sort of dive into each one?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it that way. So basically, those two dynamics: fast growing or slow growing, and market leader, high yes or no, or higher high. You are or you aren't. I guess market leader
Yeah.
are the two uh, points of reference, and that creates a 4 quadrant grid, and that really is the
Mm.
heart of it. In the show notes, we'll have a link to that 4 quadrant grid, so you can see visually what we're talking about here. But yeah, let's go through the 4 quadrants.
So starting in the top left, which is the most valuable bits, is when somebody's got a high growth market and they are the market leader, the so-called star business, which I think is Richard Koch's addition to the Boston Consulting Group matrix. Quadrant 2 is a more interesting one where you're in a high growth market, but you're a follower, which I think from my experience, a heck of a lot of people in e-commerce are in. And that's what he calls a question mark. So it could become valuable if it can take market leadership. Quadrant 3 is when you're in a low growth market, but you're the market leader. And that's what Richard Koch calls a cash cow. In other words, it will produce a lot of money for the owner, but it doesn't necessarily have the future to be a hugely valuable business, maybe somewhat valuable. And then quadrant 4 is low growth and a follower and what he calls a dogs. And basically, his advice is obviously you sell out those product lines or those businesses. So that's my understanding of that one.
Yeah, so it's a pretty straightforward framework, really.
Mm.
And you're the star, you're the cash cow. Either of those are good, or your product is. I said you should say. I guess you say, or your brand is, or you're a dog, which is just big trouble, or you're in this position where you're unsure what to do. I love that. I mean, that's a very clean framework, and I think most of us who sell for a while in a specific marketplace start to get a feel for who our major competitors are, and whether or not those competitors are better than us, bigger than us, sell more than us or not. It's sometimes hard to figure out when you're first starting, but over time you start to see their marketing, and you start to see like what they do, and you begin to realize, oh, I'm not the only person in this marketplace. And sometimes it's immediately, visible. Other times it's not. And so why don't we talk a little bit about why we like this interesting model? I mean, you were passionate about this book. You referred me to it, and obviously you made reference to it in your mastermind group and had you even bought it for all your mastermind members. Why do you like it so much? What's captivating to you about it?
So, a couple of things. I mean, the first thing is obviously a 2 by 2 matrix is the sort of cliche of management consulting, and it's very easy to dismiss something like that because it looks like everything else. And there are 3 reasons, I guess, why I like this one a great deal more than just some other neat little framework. Number one, Richard Koch, his actual results. He was a management consultant, so I guess like part of what I do and part of what you do, and he retired with about £3-5 million, or a few $1 million, paid off his house, and he had some money left to invest. So pretty late in his life, unlike a sort of big, shall we say, boastful entrepreneur type, he quietly just got on with being an investor, pure and simple, which is a mindset that I think helps business owners in terms of standing back from the situation at a 50,000-foot view, which is, I think, Richard Koch's great skill. So first of all, out of 16 investments he's made, 8 of them have had a positive return. Your average venture capitalist who are super sharp people would get 1 in 10. And for comparison, Shark's Tank, I believe that the positive return rate of the investments on that was a dismal 1 in 33. So those are spectacular, unbelievable results. And if you've done it, 16 times and 8 positive, I don't think that's a coincidence. It means he's really onto something powerful. Second thing is, I've seen this kind of pattern emerging so strongly in e-commerce markets that I've analyzed, participated in, advised on over the years. So it really makes sense of what I see in a very simple and yet truthful way. And the third thing is that it really explains, I think, the success of the biggest e-commerce blow-ups that I've been part of with mastermind members, going from sort of $2 million pounds a year, so $3 million maybe, to about 30 million in the course of 4 years. And I think a lot of it is explained by this principle, in my opinion. So that's really why I'm passionate about it.
Oh man, you've just piqued our interest with that example that you didn't really.
Muted on
Oh,
recording.
sorry. You just piqued our interest with that example. That you didn't mention the name or details, but we might have to pick your brain about that one a little bit. But yeah, I think that it is interesting. As I read this book, of course, I was constantly, as I was listening to it, trying to apply it to my own circumstance in my own, e-commerce operations. And then I was also at the same time trying to think about other clients that we work with, and I guess to your point, sort of the recipe for their success and how they've become either the star in their niche or industry, or how they become cash cow, or where they're at in that journey. And I think that's really kind of the interesting point for me, is to apply this to your specific situation in your business. And I could do that for 4 or 5 things that I'm involved in. Obviously, as an influencer brand for the Happy Gardening Life, as Pixie Fair, as a marketplace, as our Shopify consulting work that we do, and in e-commerce consulting, and then my author work with my books. Every one of these is a competitive landscape, that we could take these principles and apply to, and that's kind of what I was trying to do. I think I like it for that reason, because it gives you an understanding of orienting yourself to where you're at, and then giving you like a compass map. Like, okay, if you are here, do this. If you are there, do that. And so his, I guess you could say, a prescription for what to do where you're at is interesting. And so maybe we should talk through that as well. And I tried to share my screen and I won't let me, but I'll have it in the show notes. But basically, what his star principle recommendations are, or prescriptions are, is that if you're in the star category in a high growth market and you're the market leader, you should only do one thing: invest, invest, invest in scaling, scaling, scaling. I mean, you're the top of the industry, and you want to just pour, fuel onto that effort. And so that's the first thing to do if you're in that position. That's rarefied air, and not everybody's in that position, obviously. But if you're not, then what box are you in? And the second box, it's still very, very positive, is this low growth market where you're the leader. And so you're the leader and it's low growth market. Now, I happen to be in one of those situations, for one of our brands, and that's it's Pixie Fair. And so in that position, his number one piece of advice, his instruction to us, is protect yourself, protect your brand, protect the market leadership that you own. And that resonates with me so clearly, because Michael, you probably remember most of, or many of our podcasts, I talk about defensibility, 7 layers of defense, how to be bulletproof, how to be tiger proof. I mean, I've named and labeled all of these ideas because that's the position in the marketplace that I'm operating from. So it's very, very top of mind for me to say to myself, how do I, operate with a zone of protection and safety, and a moat, if you will, like with Warren Buffett's phrase. So those are the two super positive, categories you can find yourself in. I'd love your thoughts and ideas on those, Michael. And then we talk about the bad, the kind of the worst scenarios. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, the cash cow thing is interesting, that you're experiencing that. I guess in a sense, a lot of the pitch for a lot of not mastermind, a lot of e-commerce type businesses or internet marketing, biz ops generally, since that started in, I guess, the early 2000s, has been almost selling people the idea of a cash cow. And they use phrases like cash machine, don't they, all the time? And that's probably quite disingenuous, because that's quite hard to get to. But if you are going to support your family and live your life based on the cash flow of that, as you and Cinnamon have for years successfully, then 100% protection is actually the focus you should be having. But before you get there, you've got to have had some pretty strong growth. So I imagine that this brings in another element, which is things go through waves. For example, the smartphone or iPhone market was an absolute killer growth market, and any business that dominated that was a star market. It was a star business or business segment for Apple, for example, for a long time. Now that growth has slowed down, and Apple probably is the market leader, but they're the cash cow business now because it's a slower growth market, and which is one reason why Apple is incredibly profitable. And so I guess things go through phases. I would presume in your case that Pixie Fair did grow pretty rapidly at certain points in its history as well, which is another aspect that brings up for me.
Yeah, this is really interesting because to your point, I think people do sell internet marketing with that idea of, find your niche and all. And to use the STAR framework and to say that you're the market leader in a slow growing niche isn't exactly the only consideration, because it's not the growth of the market, it's the overall total addressable market, which is a phrase Silicon Valley app makers and software makers love to use, which is the TAM, total addressable market. And so what you find yourself in is this situation where you can be the leader in a slow growing small total addressable market niche, and that can be a wonderful place to operate. Now, you're not going to be a big company. You're going to be a leader in a but you're going to have dominance and be the leader in a small niche. It's like, think of it like a small house or a small castle. And even in E-commerce Power, my book, I write in the foreword about small islands that no one is occupying, and you can go to the small island and be the king of the small island. And that framework is, I think, directly relevant because that's so much of what's happening online. Is there are unserved small markets where no one has, I guess, to say, no one has said to themselves, this is the place I want to serve. And even though it's a small market, I'm going to be, the leader in it. Most of the time, people, when they come into e-commerce operations or work, they try to take on, like, I'm going to make sneakers. I'm going to make mobile phones. I'm going to make, I'm going to make a fashion brand. And they come into markets without segmentation or niche thinking, and they come in way too big. And so this isn't a wrinkle in the STAR model that's very interesting. Is it can be slow growth, you can be the leader, but it can also be very, very small, and that's cool. And so I think that's an interesting dynamic that we've lived out, and obviously the doll clothes pattern industry is not that big. But that's the world in which we operate, yeah, with one of our brands.
So one thought, one differentiation, or how can I put this? The idea of small markets or big markets implies a sort of stasis, like they're just small or they're just big. And what interests me is the journey from one to the other. So even if you are in a potential star market, i.e., you are a big fish in a small pond, the point is how quickly that pond is growing, right? So that growth over time is the thing that defines, a star business. But then also, even if you're in a smaller market that's less dramatically growing, whichever market you're in, it's going to have a sort of life cycle, right? So mobile phones, they didn't exist. Trying to sell one in 1988 meant you were selling to a tiny market of yuppies, as we called them in London. And then it sort of blew up, and then it's gradually tailing off, so that it's probably growing a few percent a year. But it's now turned into a cash cow for Apple, or if it's Samsung that dominates it in 5 years' time, or whoever dominates it. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
dynamic is something people miss, because I think to your
Mhm.
point, number one error that I see with people going into markets, and it's not just beginners, although they're particularly prone to this, is going to big markets without segmentation of the market into
Mhm.
niche markets. But the other one that I see is going to already large markets. To your point, I
Mhm.
think the art,
Timing. It's a
exactly to your
timing
point,
issue.
is timing.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
finding something that is at the moment small but going to become big. And to my
Mhm.
reference to the word investment earlier, I mean, I think having an investment mentality, I'm not an investment. I don't claim to have this
Mhm.
down very well, but I think as small business owners, we can be very action oriented. And I think the decision of where to invest your time, money, sweat equity, whatever,
Yeah.
your team's time, if you have one, is really critical. And I think that trying to sort of read the future of a market is a part of that, rather
Mhm.
than worrying about where it's at right now, which is the
Yeah.
general obsession. And that's
Yeah.
when I think if you just use Jungle Scout, Helium 10, even Google Trends, you can get a bit of a false steer, because they
That's
are
right.
very present oriented. They don't
Mhm.
really give you a steer of where things are going.
That's totally right, and of course, fidget spinners were all the rage one month or 1 week in the history of the last decade, but you didn't wanna enter that market, and so it's not just the velocity of growth, it's also the durability of the market itself. And that's the other, another wrinkle in this is you want to find a market to operate in that is very predictable for the long term. And to your point, maybe it is fast growing. I'll talk to that issue when we get into the conversation a bit more, because I have a different point of view on that. But But what you're looking for is a customer community that wants to continuously buy something that that they need for a very long time, that they're not being served well. And whether that market is fast growing or not, if they're ready, willing, and able to give you money for a good product that you can deliver, then it's something to consider. And it'll either put you, if you can be the leader, into the star category, and Richard's is framework, or to put you in the cash cow category. And so that's interesting. Now, if you're not in either of those categories, then in his diagram here, you are in the uh, follower position in terms of market leadership, and you're in the low growth situation in terms of the market that you're operating in. And he calls that a dog.
Mm.
And with no disrespect, I own a few of those. Like we
We
all
all
we
do.
all we all do. So let's be kind to our puppies. We love them. But his commentary or advice is to exit, or
Mm.
run, or to run them for cash.
Yeah.
Meaning, don't go crazy investing, but get really efficient, really focused on profitability, and just realize you're not the leader. It's not a fast growing market, but if you can make a profitable, outcome occur for yourself, then you're fine. Just realize you're going to be always, the second or third or fourth entrant in the market space. But you know what?
Yeah.
Crazy things happen. Sometimes the market leaders blow up, and
Yeah.
they ruin their own business. Sometimes they exit markets. Sometimes they literally abandon them. And you never know what happens. So sometimes just being the second or third or fourth runner up doesn't
Hmm.
mean you don't have an opportunity to do really, really well. So that's the
That's true.
that's the bottom right corner in the framework. Yeah. What are your thoughts,
So,
Mike?
interesting response on that. I think what interests me the most is not just sort of a newbie type focus would be, oh, how do I make sure I'm in a high growth, amazing market? Well, there's nuance to that. As you said, you don't always have to be. I think being the dominant person in a small market is way more important than the market growing fast. Having a cash cow business is still a wonderful thing. But the interesting thing for me is the relationship between these things. If you have multiple products or multiple business lines, multiple sales channels, multiple anything really, each one of them can function as a star business or business segment, or a dog, or an anything else. And I think the interesting thing is to make sure, and this is the discipline that is very simple to say, and the clarity of this thinking, I think, helps this, but hard to persuade yourself to do, which is a conversation I was having with somebody in the mastermind the other day. He's got whatever $4 million a year business, wants to grow it. He's done well recently, wants to grow it a lot more. He's got several thousand SKUs and several hundred on Amazon. And I said, okay, so really you're going to have to go through and brutally cut, or run for cash, and then don't restock the dogs and put the money into the stars. And I think that's that dynamic movement of cash from one part of your portfolio of products or of sales channels, if you will, to another, is where some of the real magic lies. Because then you're not looking for a
Yeah.
theoretical new possibility. You're shifting capital and focus within your own business.
Hmm.
And
That's
that
exactly
can really help things take off.
exactly right. You end up becoming a portfolio manager of products. And if you have a portfolio of products and you launch a second brand or buy a different company or whatever, then you end up becoming a portfolio manager of brands that have products. And there will be these outcomes at every one of these outcomes will be occurring inside your business if you have enough SKUs. And that's just the reality of it. And we work with people, and I found myself in this situation as well, where you have a star product and you're like, oh my goodness, this is like the thing. But the first thing that comes in your mind is, how do I defend myself against this not being the thing? I need a second product. I need to, like become defensible a bit. And so the second product that you bolt on may or may not be a star. Maybe you have a star, and then your second product is a dog. But then you're like, oh, bummer, kill that one. Or maybe your second product is a dog, but you say, you know what, I'm still making some money. It still adds up to help my profit and loss statement. And it maybe helps me have a bigger team or whatever. Or maybe your second product is a cash cow, and then you've got a star and a cash cow, and you're like, oh my, yeah, I've got some real strength now in my business. And so these are the things that you end up doing over time as you get more mature into your products and management of brands. Okay, so the top right corner is the one where he really has an interesting challenge for us, and that is, you're in a high growth market, but you're the follower. So it's a fast growing market, but you're the follower. This is such an interesting space to be. And his, recommendation or advice is, uh, obviously try to become the leader. He's like, sure, yes, try your best to become the leader, or sell. Or he just has a question mark. Like it's very hard to know what to do if it's a fast growing industry and you're the number two. Um, uh, in general, I think my thesis on this spot would be that you should just optimize for both growth and profitability and not run your business as a, like in a deficit. But if you're number two and it's a high growth industry, you think of many, many industries are like this. It's just Coke and Pepsi is a classic example. At some point in their prior, 100 years, it was a fast growing industry. Maybe it still is. I don't know. I don't know the numbers, but Pepsi's number two and Coke's number one. And so the question there for Pepsi is how best do they operate? And it's certainly a wonderful position to be in, to be the second brand, because what happens in fast growing markets is no one knows about the market, and then many, many, many people become exposed to it. This has happened to me. I've been on the rocket ride a few times in this, for example. Um, in different ways. And for here's my random example, just for an example. Uh, Expertise in Pinterest marketing, or kind of the educational guru space for Pinterest marketing. I started blogging about Pinterest in 2011. I literally got ranked by Google for all the key phrases related to marketing on Pinterest. It there was no one else there. So in that industry, that new industry, I was the market leader, and it was a high growth industry. And so I had a rocket ride. I got a book deal within 2 weeks from McGraw Hill and had a great book. They overpaid us on the advance because they wanted it done quick. And but then what happened over from 2011 to today, 11 years later, that industry matured. And my leadership position, as soon as big time people, big stars started talking about Pinterest marketing, I didn't have the leadership position anymore. And then I was second, and then I was third, and then I was fourth. And now, if you look at that industry now, there are many, many, many growth coaches and programs and resources and books all about how to do marketing on Pinterest. And I am not even in the conversation. It's like my thing is so old now, and my content is so old. I'm not a player in that space. And so, this is how that second or third spot works, is where you see something happening and you either going to be the leader in that growth industry or not. Now, if I would have protected myself and only ever camped on marketing on Pinterest for the last 11 years, I would be the leader, and it would probably not be a high growth industry anymore, but it'd probably be a cash cow. But I didn't do it. I just let it go because I didn't really want to be the Pinterest, educator. It was just one thing that I wrote, well, a book project to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, Michael, what are your thoughts on the top right corner, the high
So
growth
yeah.
market, but you're not the leader? Any thoughts on that one?
Well, first to your story. I mean, this is actually one of the last chapters in the book. I think it's called the fading star. So you had star positioning so it's a very fast growth market indeed, I'm sure, and you were definitely the definitive leader. So for a while that was a star business, and people talk about first mover advantage, and I think it's very interesting to analyze that in the context of your story. I don't think first mover advantage is so much what we need. What we need is star positioning. So in other words, you're in a high growth market and you're the leader. If you move first, that can be one way, as you did, maybe some degree of luck in it as well, and some degree of, obviously I'm sure you wrote good stuff as well and knew what you were talking about. But however you achieve that first move advantage, it's only really meaningful if you maintain it. So we talked earlier about the fact that if you're in the fidget spinner market, you can be the market leader, but if the market blows up or is banned by Germany, etc., then it's all over. So that's where the market fails on you. But this is an example of where the market grew very fast, but the leadership position failed. And either which way means that the value sort of plummets, really, doesn't it? So
Yeah,
it's an
totally.
important point to bear in mind.
It is an
Um,
important point, and the other piece of that is that some industries and some product types have high durability in terms of the first mover advantage, and others do not. So, for example, in the book space or educational space, um, if you can maintain it for the long term and it's a new hot industry, there is a lot of durability. But sometimes in spaces, you're only as good as the next new successful product. I mean, like, in the movie industry, for example, Hollywood studios, they can't rest on their laurels. It's only about the next new big launch. Now they end up with a beautiful back catalog, but it's always about the next new thing. Other industries, you really can get stuck in. And so this is an interesting piece. I have sort of a tweak or an adaptation to the star model that I want to broach as a subject with you here. And if we're ready to do that, this is a nice segue, I think, into kind of my thesis that I think is sort of a different approach to what the star model does. You ready to hear my twist? Yeah. Okay. So um, I was listening to the book, The Star Principle, and of course, the book is not new. I mean, I don't remember when it was published, but it's not new, and the framework itself is old, as you mentioned in the intro, from the '60s. But it's so relevant. But there was something that was off to me, and I just kept thinking, I love what he's saying, but there's something that doesn't apply to today's e-commerce environment. And I couldn't really put my finger on it. And you and I were talking about this a week or two ago, and I was trying to say to you, there's something that's not right about this and I just couldn't articulate. But here's my thesis, and I sorted it out in my mind. Imagine taking the star framework, which is this 4-box grid, and then creating a framework that has 10 boxes or 12 boxes. And each one of those little boxes, then you put the star matrix into his framework. So his framework is in 10 boxes. And so it looks like a big, huge uh, Scrabble board, I guess you could say. And visually, what I mean to present here is um, the internet age has created fractured or segmented markets that are very powerful and very interesting for us to think through. And so take the star model and then just apply it, for example, to Amazon.com, Amazon US market. And you say to yourself, am I on Amazon in a high growth segment or set of SKUs? On Amazon, am I the market leader? And that might be a true reality. And you are a multimillionaire and your business is a 7 or 8 figure business because of that reality. But on eBay, you might be a zero. And on Craigslist or Etsy or Walmart.com or Mercado Libre or Amazon.jp, the Japan Amazon market, you might be zeros. And so the segmentation or fracturing of the internet space is what's captivating to me, because what it means is his model is too simplistic for today's scenario, but it still gives great instruction. So, for example, if I'm number one on Amazon, and I'll use my own book for an example. If you look at Instagram Power Book, I think yesterday as I looked at it, it was number 38 or something like that in social media marketing on Amazon bookstore. Okay, so there it is. It's number 38. And for Instagram topic in general and within social media, it's a number 1 or 2. If you look at the other books, I'm very familiar. So for Instagram marketing in that niche on Amazon, I know kind of where I fall in the star matrix. But what about BarnesNoble.com or the Barnes and Noble bookstores themselves? What about other markets like the German-speaking market in Europe, or in Brazil, the Portuguese market, or Farsi in the Middle East? My book's been translated to those. So there you have it. You see that while I might be thinking through the framework from this one position, as a brand owner, as a business owner, I have to think of myself in a whole set of positions across a landscape of marketplaces, because there is no single market leader anymore in the digital world, in my view, unless you nail Amazon, and then you go and nail eBay, and then you go and nail Walmart.com, and then you go and nail direct to consumer on Shopify. And when you
Mm,
nail all of those things, you can say we are the industry leader for
mm,
our product. And if you don't, then you are highly susceptible to somebody saying we're the leading shoe cleaner on eBay, number
yeah.
one. or we're the leading kitchen knife on Etsy.com,
Yeah.
and they're right. They're
Yeah.
correct, and you're not. And so that to me is sort of this interesting uh, uh, current thinking or current space in which the star principle can live itself out. But it's a very segmented or fractured marketplace now online. And I think that just is a world changing difference between 30, 40 years ago when they kind of came up with this framework, where there was just one consumer market. Um,
Maybe. I
but
mean,
maybe there was even regionalization back then, and and that kind of
I,
thing. So
I was going to say,
what are
I
your
mean,
thoughts?
I think first of all, you make an extremely important point, and I think I don't think there's necessarily a conflict. The thing is that it doesn't really matter. I mean, whatever helps us is good, right? So I would say the star principle is simple enough to be something you've got to break down for yourself anyway. It's too simplistic to just go out the door and just make a buying decision on a business or a product line, isn't it? It's a very, very big picture principle anyway, I would argue. But also the segmentation piece, I think if you stand back and look at it from maybe the 70,000 foot view, the internet is a very different distribution model. The psychology of how people interact with it is different. And the segmentation of markets, say Amazon.com versus eBay versus BarnesandNoble.com, if your products appear in all, I mean, that's not a great example, Walmart.com. They're all American consumers nationally. That's one form of segmentation between different internet marketplaces, for example. But then, as you say, especially in America, and you're American, I'm not, I don't know, but America's a very regional country. It's huge, it's a continent size. So I guess that there are regional markets that traditionally existed before the internet. And let's not forget, before Amazon really nailed into, national distribution in a very, very quick, amazing time frame, the sheer size of it when you're dealing with e-commerce and physical products as opposed to digital was still a very much a thing. So I would say that the important piece that I take from everything you said and the star principle is really simply that it's market specific. So you could be dominant in Amazon Germany or Germany as a whole. Maybe that's more of a pre-internet thinking. Maybe now it's Amazon Germany or Amazon
Yeah,
Japan,
yeah,
and completely not even existing in America. And by the
hmm
way, to be fair, that's been around for ages. There've been
sure,
pop
yeah,
stars that have made millions selling in the UK and Europe that have never been heard in America. It's
yeah,
actually hard to crack. There are products that I've got. This person that I mentioned that's got to about $30 million revenue doesn't never sold in America. And rather, they did try
yeah,
America. They kind of felt it wasn't for them in the way they were
hmm
doing it at that point, and they're selling in UK and Europe only,
hmm
quotes unquote.
yeah,
So I think you're right. It's about dominating a specific market with a specific in any specific kind of category of product.
hmm
And you're absolutely right about that being the key point. I think it's completely relevant to be everywhere if you can't be the winner everywhere, as you said.
yeah,
You
totally
want to
right.
buy.
I as I was thinking about this, I got a few resources, just poked around. There's a good book by Porter. I don't know the details, but I'm just looking at an article.
Mm.
And they talk about strategies for operating in a segmented or a fractured market. Um, and I like this. I'll put it in the show notes. And there's a little like 5-step plan. First, conduct a full industry analysis. And that's like logical, but most of us probably don't do that. Like we just look at Keepa or whatever, and we think, oh, okay, this is the scenario on Amazon, but you have no idea what the scenarios are outside of Amazon with that data. So doing a full industry analysis, if you're interested in a specific niche, I think is a great starting point. Just get a big landscape, have somebody on Fiverr do a full like industry landscape research project for you, and you'll learn so much about your competitors and all that. So that's one thing. The second step in their model is identify the cause of fragmentation. Now, this is interesting. To your point, could be geographic. It could be marketplace, like to my point earlier. There could be other reasons though, and you want to understand those. The third idea is examine the causes of fragmentation one by one and determine if and how they can be overcome. So if you can be number one on Amazon, can you also then be number one on Walmart.com? And can you overcome the challenges? Fourth thing is, if it can be overcome, is it best defensible or is it defendable once you become the market leader? And then the fifth step is, if it can't be overcome, what do you do? What are the best alternatives for behavior? And that's an interesting framework. So I think this is the position we leave ourselves in, which is taking his model and asking ourselves the question: based on what I'm doing right now with my product, whatever it is, physical, digital, a service, it doesn't matter what it is. My product exists in a lay of the land. And where am I in relation to the competitors and the growth, speed, and velocity of the market, size of the market? And then how do I behave? And that's why I really love the model. It's so practical for each of us, regardless of the size or, you know, quality of our business. It applies to everybody who's trying to sell online. So, Michael, you want to wrap it up for us? Final thoughts?
Sorry about the pause. Just typing, so I don't want to tap at everyone. Yeah, I like that. Those, is it by Porter, the forces of strategy guy? Is that right? Those things you just came up with.
Yeah, it's a book called Competitive Strategy by, I don't know if
Yeah,
it's Michael Porter, but it's yeah,
yeah.
1980. Yeah.
I really like that. I mean, what's interesting is that I think that's just as valid as anything that's written in the last, more internet era. I think the full industry analysis, to your point, is excellent because most of us don't do that on Amazon. The danger is that if you're really trying to build a brand over the medium term, the fact that you can dominate on Amazon may ignore the fact that you've got some giant competitor breathing down your neck who's beautifully funded and incredibly strong brand who could just easily put products on Amazon. And that's one thing that people need to scan for, I think. Really like the identifying the cause of fragmentation and so forth. That's really fascinating. So I like that a lot. I think in general, I would say, how can I put this? General principles can be either something you overly fall in love with, and I have a tendency to do that if you love strategy thinking, or just dismiss as not very practical. I think the art is to use them as a lens through which to look at your business as part of a process of making, a really thorough assessments of, number one, as you said, where you're at. Number two, and I guess this is like is it the gold rush questions? Where do you want to get and how are you going to get there? So as part of that kind of process, they can be valuable lenses to look through, just like the 80-20 analysis. I would never say to somebody, do an 80-20 analysis and then go and have, a cigarette and relax while everything takes care of itself. Nor would I say the same about the STAR principle, but I would say
Yeah.
it can give
Yeah.
amazingly valuable insights, sometimes quite upsetting insights. If you've got 300 SKUs and most of them are dogs and should be sold, that's not an easy thing to swallow. That's a sunk cost fallacy. But I do think the clarity and simplicity of it actually can cut through a lot of noise in your own head and in your own business as well.
Yeah, The Goal. I can see it in my right in my video camera behind me. The Goal by Eliyahu Goldrate was the book you were referencing, and his question prompt is what to change to, and how to make the change. And it's so macro; it's like relevant to anything in life, but it's awesome. So yeah, so I think you're right. That totally applies to this. Okay, great conversation, man. How should we end this? I would just end with a simple call to action, and that is, if you like this show and you happen to listen on Spotify, would you give us some 5-star ratings or your highest and best review, whichever number that might be? It is a 5-star system, and they newly inserted that into the Spotify tool set, I believe. I didn't see it before, and about a month ago. I'd love your highest and best review on Spotify, and that would be really, really helpful. The show is blowing up. I was just looking at the stats yesterday. We're growing really quickly, and it's just an honor to see everybody jumping in, both in the call-in app and also just on Spotify, which is what I generally look at for stats. And it's just an honor to be able to serve a growing community of awesome e-commerce sellers that are changing the world with their products and making a difference, and serving customers well. So thank you, everybody, for letting us serve you with these shows and with the content. Michael, as always, it's an honor. Great conversation.
Likewise. Thanks, man.
Okay. Bye, everybody.